Betrayal at House on the Hill 3rd edition could be the best horror board game, but what makes it so special? I was first given this note by Avalon Hill. Greetings, courageous explorer. We at Avalon Hill have selected you and your brave group of explorers to embark on a thrilling journey filled with terrifying haunts, mysterious rooms, and chilling secrets in Betrayal at House on the Hill 3rd edition. Before you enter the abandoned haunted house, where you'll never know what you may encounter, we encourage you to learn more about what to expect in the note below. The house on the hill still sits abandoned, and a fearless group of explorers has been drawn to the house to discover its dark secrets. Immerse yourself in the narrative gameplay as you take on the role of one of those explorers. The Betrayal at House on the Hill 3rd edition cooperative board game includes 50 chilling haunts and dozens of danger-filled rooms that will terrify even the strongest among you. At first you'll work together, but beware. One explorer will betray the others, and then the haunt begins. This edition of the popular Haunted House Trader game features content and gaming elements that help new players jump right in. So gather friends for a game night of monsters, miniatures, and modular board game pieces in this immersive, story-driven trader game for 3 to 6 players ages 12 and up. The game includes Trader's Tome and Secrets of Survival haunt books, 6 double-sided character boards, 6 finely detailed character figures, 6 character figure bases, 30 clips, 8 dice, 74 cards, 5 scenario cards, monster reference card, trader reference card, 6 player reference cards, 3 starting tiles, 42 single room tiles, number track and pointer, 114 cardboard tokens, and the rulebook. Other explorers can bring home their own haunted mansion at HasbroPulse.com, with Betrayal at House on the Hill's 3rd edition now available for pre-order for $55.99 USD. The rest of the instructions on here are for me, and let the haunt begin. Good luck, Avalon Hill. Thank you, Avalon Hill, for sending me this game for free to review. Now let's take a look inside this box that they sent me and uncover the actual board game. And here it is. Betrayal at House on the Hill 3rd edition, designed by Bruce Glasgow. You have your other information there, very nice picture of the house on the front and the explorers right in front of it. And on the back of the box, you have the contents and description, which were covered in the note. So let's get into this box. And upon opening the lid, we are greeted by the tiles first of all. There's quite a few of these, and this is what builds the mansion. But this also includes your character tiles, as well as your monsters and other tokens. Let's take a look at these by punching them out. They're not difficult to punch out, they have little tabs on it to make it easy for you, so that's good. And this one here is sort of like 3 tiles stuck together. Each of these tiles here with the L's on it is the starting of your mansion, the starting of the house. This is your ground floor, this one is for the basement, and this one here is for the top of the stairs that start right there. And so you'd spread that out probably even further than this in real life when you're playing the game, and that's where you start placing your tiles from will be the doorways. So far I've just punched out all the room tiles, but you can see just how many there are, and there's some good detail on these too. It allows you lots of variation when you're randomly building this mansion. So even if you're playing through the same haunt scenario, you're going to have a different experience. You may come across something more like the Winchester house if you happen to create a board where there's random doors leading to nowhere. I'm just impressed at how many different things are here for rooms. Some of the different effects that can happen, such as the collapse room where heroes take damage on it, or the soundproof room which causes you to take an Omen card. There's a ton of different tiles here. Primary bedroom, gym, a mystic elevator, that's interesting. Things you'd expect to be in a haunted house like a dining room, or operating theater, what's going on here? Ballroom, of course, specimen room. Oh, that's another interesting one. And for drawing tiles, your character will be standing in one of these places. And let's say that you're in the main floor right now. You want to place a tile right there, you want to move into that room. But the one that's on top right now is only upper or basement. So you just put that to the bottom, and you see that this next one is for upper or ground. So then you place it down and line up the doorway to it. Just like that. Now there's a lot more tokens here. I'll be taking a look at the characters right away. Yeah, you can see just how many tokens there are for all the different haunts that are available. I almost forgot about these 2 other sheets of tiles, so there's a lot more than I expected. And here's the rest of the tokens. These ones all represent small monsters, as you can see, and there's a ton of other ones representing different monsters. There's also things representing the player characters too, that's interesting. Status effect for being hidden, on-off switches, hidden or searched, looks like. And yes, you have a stun status for all the monsters. Something that I do actually really appreciate about these monsters is that while there's not miniatures, I don't think that that's the focus of this game. It's almost scarier to have something that you don't quite know what it is. Like, yes, there's a picture of a vampire on here, but the vampire that you imagine from that will be always a lot scarier than what a miniature could ever be. And that really fits with the theme of this game, being a horror game. Jack's spirit is a really good example of that. You just see a smiling face with 2 strands of hair, you don't see anything else of them, and that's what makes it terrifying. At the top here, there's different runes, and I wonder what those do. In order to get a proper look at these characters here, I need to do 2 things. The first of which is pulling out these miniatures, which there are 6 of, as well as open up this papery bag. In here you find the dice, which I'll get to in a bit, and also these tiny sword or gravestone looking things for the characters to keep track of their stats. And as you may notice, there's little punched out pieces here. They come out rather easily, and that's where you stick the markers into. Once they're on, they will stay on because they have a little piece to help them stay on here. Ooh, that is not how you do it. It does take a little bit of finessing to get these on the cards, but once they're on, you should never have to take them off. As you may have seen here, I accidentally damaged it, but that may have just been my user error and nothing wrong with the product itself. And to start, you put each of those on the green numbers. You may notice here that there's 2 types of stats. There's physical stats like speed and might, and then there's mental stats of knowledge and sanity. And each card has 2 different characters on it, represented by 1 miniature. Depending on which side you use, they're going to have different starting stats, so you'll have to adjust each of these accordingly. So you have Oliver Swift here on one side, and Joseph Broseph Hooper on the other. Then you're also getting Persephone Puleri, and Stephanie Richter, Michelle Monroe, and Brittany Beatbox Bowen, Father Warren Leung, and Dan Nguyen MD, Anita Hernandez, and Isa Valencia, Jaden Jones, and Sammy Angler. With each of these cards with their little markers on them, there's still actually some spares at the bottom of this package. So in case one breaks, you have many more to replace it with. These are all the miniatures representing the explorers. Let's take a closer look. The first thing you may notice about them is that they have this big piece of plastic on them, and this is actually separatable if you want to. This would be good for painting it so you don't accidentally get paint on these. And the reason that they have a certain color is because it corresponds to each card. So you don't even have to guess using the general appearance of what character is which. You can just easily tell, oh, the red guy is Joseph Broseph or Oliver Swift. Because of these pieces of plastic fitting a 1-inch size base, what you can do is slip any miniature in here, as long as it has a 1-inch size base. This is just the wizard from Hero Quest. In case you're wondering detail-wise, they look pretty good. And one interesting thing about these is that you don't see modern miniatures too often, you see a lot of fantasy ones. But except for Zombicide maybe, you don't see too many in modern clothes. So let's say you have a D&D campaign that's a murder mystery or set in a haunted mansion, these miniatures would be perfect for that. In case you were wondering how these miniatures compare to Hero Quest, I've got you covered too. The reason I've separated these into 2 separate rows is because these are all adults back here, and these 2 are children. All the adults are of a very similar height, so I have a couple miniatures here to compare them to. First, we have a comparison to the Hero Quest Wizard. It doesn't surprise me that these are both similar scale, just because they're both games made by Avalon Hill very recently, and they're both humans too. Because this elf is female, I'm actually going to use one of the other miniatures to compare. And the females are actually taller, although that could also be because of this elf's pose. She's not quite standing straight. Here's another comparison using the Hero Quest Zombie, the new one, as well as this guy right here. Aside from the zombie's maybe oversized head, they're actually very similar in proportions. Here's these miniatures' size in comparison to a Warhammer cultist. Then, because they're smaller, there's the children. If we're looking at the new Hero Quest again, one of the closest things in size may be this goblin here. Well, he is hunched over, he's fairly close in height, and even though his arms are thin, they're actually fairly close as well. And even closer in height yet is this dwarf, which I'm still working on painting. He's a lot stockier and has thicker limbs than these little children, which you would expect from a muscly dwarf. If you want yet another comparison, I have Gimli lying around here from the Middle-earth strategy battle game, and these children are also taller than a hobbit. There's Sam with his good old frying pan. As promised, here are the dice. There's 8 of them in total, and something you may notice about them is that they only have 3 faces. You either can roll a 1, a 2, or nothing. And these dice are used multiple times throughout the game, both to determine when a haunt will happen, and also during combat. I really like these dice, and they really add to the atmosphere of the game being mysterious, and not something you'd see elsewhere. And if you really wanted to classify these as a dice type, they are actually D3s, because there's 2 on 2 sides, 1 on 2 sides. You could consider the blank side to be a 3, and that's also on 2 sides. The amount of might that a character currently has will determine how many dice you will roll for combat. And for combat, you're comparing the 2 rolls, seeing who got the higher number in total. Next, it's worth taking a look at the cards. And the first thing that I can see is that there's monster cards. So these gray cards appear to be reference cards. There's 6 for the players, because there can be up to 6 players for this game, as well as a trader reference and a monster reference. These are good if you don't want to look through the rulebook, and it gives you a quick reference for what you need to do, such as all the actions as a player that you can do on your turn, and how to start the haunt as well. Next in this stack of cards are different scenarios. There are 5 different ones here, and these are what start your story. So there's paranormal investigators, a strange disappearance, for sale, cursed, and a mysterious invitation. And on the opposite sides of these cards, they determine which haunt you will get as well. Events are spooky things that can happen. So as soon as you place this tile that has an event symbol on it, what you'll do is draw the top card of this deck. Now there's many different events here, as you can see by this thick stack of them, such as the stars at night. There are lights in the dim ceiling, twinkling across the entire room. There are too many of them to count. What are they? Stars? Eyes? Choose a trait to roll. And this is also where you get to use your dice. Depending on the outcome of the roll, there's different things that can happen. So these events are things that are going to change your stats throughout the game, and also provide immersion and more mystery to the story in a way too. Radio broadcast. A radio hisses on behind you, and a crackly voice begins to read news from years gone by. On this day in 1980. Roll 2 dice. 3 to 4, you gain 1 knowledge. This song came out. A poppy tune begins to play. Or 0 to 2, you take 1 die of mental damage. A nuclear attack launched on Washington, D.C. There's a lot of interesting ones in here. Obviously, as a player, you're not going to know what the event is because you shuffle these all up, and you just draw the top one and read it. If you put down the graveyard tile, then you have to draw an Omen card. There's still many of them, but there's not as many as the event cards. With each of the omens triggering a different haunt based on the item that was interacted with, it sounds very similar to the cabin in the woods. Idol. The idol is made of a strange worn stone. You can't quite make out what it is supposed to represent. Add 1 to the result of your might rolls. When you discover a tile with an event symbol, you may choose to not draw an event card. When this card is drawn, make a haunt roll. Ignore this roll if the haunt has already begun. From taking a look at all these Omen cards, they actually do seem to be positive for the players, but others do have caveats with them, such as the dagger here lowering your speed by 1 each time you use it. The trade-off is that drawing these can begin to trigger a haunt. So what you do for that is you count how many cards the players are actually holding of these Omens, and you will roll that many dice. So let's say that in play between all the players, they have 4 Omens. We'll roll 4 dice, and if the result is 5+, which it is not, then the haunt would begin. Like that roll that I just got. We'll learn more about that when we look at the rulebook, but first is the items. That's what composes the rest of this deck. The item cards are also found as you're exploring through the house, as shown by this symbol here, and there's quite a few of them. A rabbit's foot that lets you re-roll 1 die, Angel's Feather that allows you to choose a number between 0 and 8, Dynamite as a weapon, Chainsaw as a weapon as well, a fully loaded gun to attack people with or monsters with, Crossbow, Machete, a map, Mystical Stopwatch, Skeleton Key to move through walls, oh that's interesting, Necklace of Teeth, ooh, it's kind of cool, Leather Jacket, meaning that you get extra defense die, it's pretty good, a brooch, where you can choose to take just general damage instead of mental or physical, Strange Amulet, headphones, flashlight, magic camera, a creepy doll, a lucky coin, first aid kit, mirror, and strange medicine. And of course, during the course of an ordinary game, you're not going to be seeing all of these cards, just because it's random based upon how you explore, as well as the placement of those random tiles, and also the shuffling of the cards themselves. There's a few more things left in here, including the rulebook. It opens up with that same illustration that's on the box art, and a little description of the game there. Nice explanation of how to use the rulebook, contents of the rulebook, a nice little introduction if you're new to the game, the different types of symbols that are used throughout this rulebook, and this is really good. If you've played before, the important changes you need to know, such as no stealing allowed, there being corpses that you can take items from, and all things like that. Next, there's the contents, so you can see exactly what you're getting, as well as a nice little guide on how to set up the game, and what a typical table setup will look like. Then there's a component overview, telling you a brief description of what everything is meant to do, such as how damage affects your stats and how to do that on the slaughters, how to handle the haunt rolls and the dice, how you start playing the game before the haunt happens, including movement, which is one of the main things you're going to be doing in the game, how you discover those new room tiles, explanations of when to draw the different types of cards, discovering new rooms, ending your turn, other things to do on your turn if you don't remember from the reference card, the rules on how to play after the haunt begins, and these are different depending on which type of scenario you have, because there's no traitor, one traitor, hidden traitor, or free-for-all. If you haven't yet figured it out, this game is somewhat similar to Clue, and I suppose Among Us, due to the fact that you're not sure which one of you in the group is the traitor until it's too late. Steps to perform right as the haunt begins, how attacking works, line of sight as well, which obviously you cannot see through walls there, but you can see through doors and downstairs, and the different stages of the haunt. That's really good. As well as an explanation on how to use different types of books, which I will show you in a little bit. More information about the haunt, including how difficulty scales with different numbers of players, how monsters are controlled, how dying works, and how the game is ended. Then there's a nice page here that I was not expecting, with character descriptions, so you can really get to know your character if you want to increase your immersion of the game. For your own quick reference, there's a nice little index at the back, as well as a cool illustration of a werewolf, and the credits. The two remaining books are The Traitor's Tome and The Secrets of Survival. As you can see from the front here, you're not meant to read these until the haunt scenario begins, and quite obviously the Traitor's Tome is for the traitor, and The Secrets of Survival are for the heroes. These are quite thick books, as you can see. Inside here it gives you a reference of the tokens, and it actually provides a framework of what all the different pieces of information are and what they mean. So a guide on how to read this, and then the rest of it will be the instructions for the haunt. And there's a lot in here. If you take a look at the numbers, ooh, I really like that distressed page. There's a total of 50 in this book. And before you separate into two separate groups, you'll be reading the introduction. For this one, it's as you explored the house, your companions spoke of Crimson Jack, the notorious serial killer who was brought down in this very mansion 20 years ago to the day. They knew that Jack's body had been killed, but they had no idea that his spirit still remained in this old place. You barely managed to suppress your murderous grin as you realized the truth. Jack's back. And it gives you instructions as a traitor on what you need to do, as well as Jack's stats. Cool little instructions for if you win. And of course, there's the objective that you have, and the tokens you need. If we were to instead look at the Secrets of Survival, again it shows you all the tokens, again gives you a guide. Interestingly enough, the heroes have a different introduction. Your parents used to say Crimson Jack as a cautionary tale. Don't stay out too late, they'd say, or Crimson Jack will get you. As you tell of the serial killer's evil deeds, an unnatural smile flickers across your friend's lips, and a chill runs down your spine. Your companion, it seems, was out after dark. Gives the heroes objectives as well, the tokens you guys need, which of course are exactly the same as the ones in the Traitor's book, because it's the same haunt, and a thing to do once you win. Whereas the Traitor's Tome is like a very distressed old book, including with squished flies and an illustration of a ghost. The survival book here is meant to look more like an old notebook, with some blood spots on it of course. I saw one called Terms and Conditions. I'm not reading that one. The box is now empty, but there's something that I need to show you about this tray. First, I will say that just like Hero Quest, the miniatures do fit in a little bit tightly. Like you can hear that snap, but it doesn't feel like you're gonna break them or anything. If you do not paint your miniatures, this will be no problem. While you still have the option to paint the miniatures, I don't necessarily think it needs it. I think the focus of this game is less so the miniatures, and more the actual experience of the game itself. Like, sure, Hero Quest has the atmosphere of going through the dungeon, but the miniatures are a huge part of that, whereas this one just has 6 character miniatures, and then you're almost making up the monsters in your own head. But that was not what I wanted to show you. It is actually the organization aspect of this tray. Whoever designed this is a genius, and I love them for it. All too often with board games, such as this old Monopoly copy, pieces get jumbled around. Yes, there is the bank here to keep the cash organized, but your characters like the Iron and Moneybag are all jumbled together with the hotels and the properties. It's just a big mess. But this tray is something special. Upon removing the cards here, something I noticed is that there was a cavity. And what fits in the cavity? Only your 8 dice, allowing you to put your cards over top and still keep things organized. I haven't punched these out just yet, but presumably they will all fit in the center here. You still could put them in a baggie if you want. All these character cards fit in a nice stack, just like that in the center. There's a nice gap underneath for the rest of those tokens. And for your room tiles, it's a similar story. In the bottom left, where this paper packet originally lived, is exactly where you place all your room tiles. Just divide them in half, stuff them in here. And now you may be asking, but what about this long hallway one? Where does that fit? Right on top. And if you take a look here, they designed it so that you can still fit that extra little door in there. Then presumably that big counter goes somewhere like right there. Looks like there's a groove within here too, so I'm not sure if other cardboard tokens can fit in here or what exactly that's for. But yeah, I'm very satisfied with this being very organized like this, because all too often you have board games that are just a huge mess. And it's nice to see one that's rather nicely organized for a change and functional too. With Hero Quest, I liked it, but it suffered the problem of being too tight on the miniatures. With the game now all unboxed, not everything is sunshine and rainbows with it. I have some criticisms here. The first problem is with those character cards. I'm not sure if I'm just dumb with putting those things on or what, but it seems like the clips have a possibility of damaging the cards, and people who want to keep their game in a good shape will probably not like that. Unlike Hero Quest with a set board size, the game using these tiles actually presents a problem. And that problem is a board that spans quite a wide distance. And also having to constantly reshuffle these to be able to fit that. Take for instance this basement here. If I were to add on this furnace room, it's overlapping this tile. The guest quarters over there on the main floor. So that means I have to either shift all of the main floor stuff or all of the basement things, which because it's smaller, I will be doing that. So you have to drag these down, and only then does it actually fit properly. Of course, this still should fit on a standard sized dining table, but it means that you'll be constantly adjusting things and having to do that throughout the entire game. The random nature of this game means that there's a highly variable playtime, and the possibility of heroes winning or losing quite quickly, based upon whether their objective is already on the board or not. All the players really need to be learning the rules as they go. There's really no game master who has additional knowledge or could help them. Yes, you have access to the rulebook, but it's always nice to have one player who's played before and at least knows what they're doing, and I suppose that you wouldn't run into this issue if you have played the game before. This game may not always be the best game for people who like only cooperative play, but in all fairness, the title of the game does imply a traitor. While each of the different haunts provides variation and a lot of gameplay options, what it means is that each time you play the game, you might constantly be in that phase of a board game where you're still in the process of learning rules and understanding objectives. I was about to say that this is not the best game to play with your kids, but the reluctant traitor rule allows them to pass that responsibility to you. With so many little tokens, it means that they're more likely to get lost when compared to something like full miniatures, but if you take extra care in keeping all the pieces organized, that should be no issue. One of the biggest criticisms which we encountered during the game is that haunt rules can sometimes overwrite the rulebook and reference cards rule set, and so that could create some confusion if people want to go off of the rulebook, but the trader book says otherwise. And this one's very minor, but your playtime can go a lot longer than what's on the box. Or at least it did for us. I was actually able to play this game. And because of that, I have some thoughts about the gameplay as well. I want to preface this first by saying that it was an overall enjoyable experience, and it was a fun game, even though we lost in the end against the traitor. One of the first things that we noticed about the game that one of the players really liked was the fact that character birthdays were the way to determine who goes first rather than it being the oldest or youngest player. It means even if you play with the exact same people, you're not going to be going in the same order each time. My dad really liked using the sliders a lot better than the squares that you have to cross off for the Hero Quest health, because you just have to slide up a little thing rather than writing in a new box each time. Something we discovered quite quickly but might confuse new players if they didn't look too closely at the rulebook is the fact that you only pick up the item or omen cards when you first place down a tile and not when you walk into it afterwards. As soon as we started playing, another question was arisen. How do you get to the basement? That was quickly answered with an event card, which took my dad down into the basement, and I went down willingly with the Mystic Elevator. For a while there, we were confused as how to get out, but luckily there's secret stairs that can come in through another tile, and that allows you to go back into the hallway. Like any new board game, we had to refer to the rules quite a bit, and we needed to guess for a couple things as well, and that was especially true during the Haunt. The Haunt really became like a different game because it added in different mechanics, and things that we didn't experience in the first part of the game, like combat. If you happen to have the Idle Omen, you're going to be extra effective in combat because that uses might. And for what I can gather, that does increase the difference between the two dice rolls, meaning that you have an advantage over the other players. Something we didn't get right away with combat was what physical damage is compared to just might damage. And physical damage means you get to spread it out between speed and might, making you stay alive a lot longer than if it was just decreasing your might. If you're wondering what haunt scenario we got 40, and that one came with some unique rules that broke some general guidelines in the rulebook and quick reference guide. For instance, the twins in this haunt use our hero movement rather than having movement dice. My mom was the traitor for this one, having been the haunt revealer. And even though the traitor isn't supposed to tell the heroes their objective, she still needed to ask a couple rule questions. So we didn't exactly do what we were supposed to by separating into two groups. But she still won in the end because she got really good rolls and good cards as well, including that aforementioned idol. A funny thing with combat in this game too is that there's a chance for low rolls, even with lots of dice. One of the heroes had the dagger, which allows you to roll 2 extra dice on your attack at the sacrifice of 1 speed. So he had about 6 dice in total, and he got about 2 or 3 between all 6 dice. And my mom got, I think, 5 or 6 with 4 dice maybe? So even with a high number of dice, combat can still be determined by luck. Once a hero takes damage, they're at a severe disadvantage. With low might, it means that they have less dice to attack and defend with, and with low speed, it means that they can't get away from traitors or monsters quite as fast. It costs 2 movement to get out of room with a traitor or monster. By the end of the game, I had only 2 movement left, so I could move only 1 room away. In doing so, I got killed quite quickly. A final thing that surprised me, that I maybe should have expected from the language in the rulebook, is that there's a chance of death from having events occur. Depending on the outcome of your roll with events, you may just lose 1 sanity or 1 might, and if you're already wounded, that could kill you. Now, you could say just stop exploring rooms, however, heroes have a certain objective that they can only get once they find a certain room, and so your game could be ended by one person dying because they suffered damage from an event card. Just one of the strange oddities with this game. As previously mentioned though, it was still very fun, and I think as I play this game more, I may get more used to the mechanics, same as how D&D is quite intimidating for a lot of people at first, but you eventually get the hang of it. If you want to learn more about the gameplay, Hasbro posted an excellent video on their YouTube channel that you should check out. And another cool thing is that when this game officially releases, there's also an app coming with it as well, which is similar to the Hero Quest companion app, where it can do quite a few of the functions that you would normally handle with just the board game, and it can be helpful for rule clarifications and things like that. What I've done here is create what might be a typical setup of this board game, just to give you a general idea of what it looks like when you're actually playing the game. While it's not without its flaws, overall, I would say that Betrayal at House on the Hill is one of the best, if not the best, horror board game on the market right now. With interesting mechanics, a good amount of replayability due to the variety of haunts that are available, and an immersive story, I would say that Betrayal at House on the Hill 3rd edition is definitely worth your money. If you like creepy things, watch this eerie video I made, and if you like board games, go watch my Hero Quest review as well.